The scan results came back, and nobody on the bridge said a word. Eurovel stood very still in front of the display screen. He had been a captain for 11 days. This was his first real mission, a routine survey run to a small colony world near the outer edge of compact mapped space. His supervisor had called it a gentle start, a way to get comfortable with command before anything difficult came along. The screen did not look gentle. Every biometric column was highlighted in red. Cortisol levels, extreme. Adrenaline response capacity, extreme. Skeletal density, far above standard sapient range. Pain tolerance markers, off the measurable scale. Cellular regeneration rate, 3 times the Drenathy baseline. The system had tried to place the species into a known threat category and failed on the first attempt. It had run the scan twice more before settling on a classification. Apex Predator, Category 4. Approach with extreme caution. For context, Category 3 was a Koroth hound, the animal compact security teams used to clear hostile fauna from landing zones. Category 4 did not come up often. Eurovel had studied it once in the academy as a theoretical example. He looked at the planet below. Green and brown and blue. Quiet. Species count, he asked. 412 confirmed life signs, said the sensor operator. A young Sovari named Rel, all concentrated in one location. Looks like a surface settlement. Structures, cultivated land, some kind of animal enclosures. Weapons. Nothing we can identify from orbit. Some metal tools. Basic construction equipment. Rel paused. They have fires. Multiple sites. Eurovel turned to his second in command. Das was Sovari, older, and had served on survey vessels for 22 years. She had 4 arms and the permanent expression of someone who had seen everything twice and found it mildly interesting the second time. You read? He asked her. The scan is the scan, she said simply. I would want behavioral data before I drew conclusions. That was the careful answer. The experienced answer. The manual, however, was clear. Category 4 bioclassification required immediate quarantine protocol. No surface contact. Observation only. Full report filed within 6 hours. Eurovel was 11 days into his first command. He did not want to be the officer who ignored a Category 4 alert on his first mission. Quarantine protocol, he said. Standard observation pattern. No signals, no contact. We watch. Das said nothing. She nodded once and went to her station. The Ardent Cross settled into a quiet orbit and watched. For the first day, Eurovel barely left the observation deck. He told himself it was diligence. He wanted to understand what they were dealing with. The colony, humans, the archive file said, species 7714H, homeworld Earth, went about its business below without any visible awareness of the ship above them. They farmed. Long rows of something green covered the southern fields. Teams of humans worked through the midday heat without stopping, with no shade covering them, moving at a steady pace for hours. Eurovel checked the surface temperature. It was 31 degrees by compact standard. Drenathy outdoor work protocols recommended rest periods at 26. The humans did not rest. They built things. The settlement had a cluster of permanent structures at its center and was actively expanding outward. A team was raising the frame of a new building on the eastern edge. They worked with the kind of easy coordination that came from doing the same task many times, passing materials, calling out to each other, moving in patterns that needed no explanation between them. Children ran between the work sites. They were not kept away from the construction. They handed things to the adults, carried small loads, and occasionally sat and watched before running off again. In the evening, fires appeared at several points across the settlement. Humans gathered around them. The sound sensors picked up something the translation module identified as structured vocalization, repeated patterns, rhythmic, non-communicative in function. They're singing, said Rel, sounding surprised. Log it, said Eurovel. He stayed and watched the fires for a long time. The Category 4 label sat in the corner of every display screen like a warning he kept forgetting to be afraid of. On the second day, one of the science team brought him the archive file. It was thin. Humanity had been in the compact registry for 40 years, but formal contact was only 29 years old. The initial survey team had done exactly what Eurovel had done: scanned, flagged, quarantined, filed, moved on. He read through the biology section carefully. The regeneration data alone was remarkable. Humans healed from injuries that would hospitalize a Drenathy for months. Their cardiovascular system was built for sustained output over long distances. Their hands were strange, soft enough to feel fine textures, strong enough to crush. Their eyes saw well in low light. They could survive a meaningful range of temperatures, pressures, and nutritional conditions. Every single feature, read in isolation, looked like a weapon. Eurovel closed the file and looked at the colony again. A group of the small ones, the children, were playing some kind of game in an open field near the settlement's edge. They were chasing each other, falling, getting up, laughing. One of them fell hard enough that Eurovel tensed. The child sat up, looked at a scraped knee, and went back to running. The young ones heal fast too, Rel observed. They're all the same species, Eurovel said. He watched the child run and thought about the Category 4 label and tried to make those two things sit together in his mind. They did not sit easily. Das appeared beside him with a data pad. End of day 2, she said. Observation log updated. Do you want to file the preliminary report to command tonight? Tomorrow, Eurovel said. I want one more day of data. Das took the pad back. She did not say anything, but her expression suggested she found this decision interesting. Below, the fires came on again. The singing started again. The lights of the settlement glowed small and warm against the dark ground. Eurovel stayed at the window until the colony's night was half done. It was the third morning when the child wandered off. The observation deck was quiet. The early shift had just started and most of the crew was still eating. Rel was at the sensor station running a passive sweep when the alert came through, small life sign, moving away from the colony settlement, heading south into the open grasslands. Eurovel looked up from his chair. How old? Rel ran the biometric estimate. Young. Very young. 6 or 7 years by human developmental markers. A pause. It's alone. Eurovel walked to the main display. The colony's southern edge was where the cultivated fields ended and the wild grass began, tall, pale yellow, moving in slow waves in the morning wind. The child's life sign was a small blue dot moving steadily deeper into it. Has anyone from the colony noticed? He asked. Not yet. Rel adjusted the scan radius. Wait, yes. One adult life sign leaving the settlement perimeter, moving in the same direction. One. Just one. Eurovel pulled up the surface fauna data his science team had compiled over 3 days. The grasslands south of the colony were home to what they had cataloged as ridge stalkers, native pack predators, 6-limbed, built low to the ground with a wide shoulder span and thick necks. Each one massed approximately the same as a full-grown Drenathy. They hunted in groups. The file noted they were highly territorial and had been observed circling the colony's southern field boundaries on 2 separate occasions. Ridge stalkers in the southern sector? He asked. Rel checked. Yes. Pack of 6. Moving northeast. She looked up. They'll intersect the child's path in about 4 minutes. Nobody on the bridge spoke. Eurovel's hand hovered over the communication controls. He could hail the colony. He could warn them. Protocol said no contact. But a child was about to walk into a pack of predators, and the single adult following had no idea what was coming through the grass toward them. Sir, Rel started. I see it. He did not move his hand. He watched the screen. 3 blue dots, child, adult, and the converging pack, moving toward the same point. The adult reached the child first. The life sign data showed 2 dots merging and then stopping. The adult had the child. Then the pack arrived. Eurovel pulled the visual feed. The long-range camera was not perfect at this distance and through the grass, but it was enough. He could see her, a human female, compact, wearing the same kind of rough working clothes most of the colony adults wore. She had the child on her hip. She had turned to face the direction the animals were coming from. The ridge stalkers came out of the grass and stopped about 12 meters from her. Eurovel counted them. 6 as logged. Each one massive and low and absolutely still, the way predators went still when they were deciding whether something was worth the effort. The woman put the child down behind her. Then she made herself large. It was the only way Eurovel could describe what he watched. She spread her arms wide. She straightened her back. She pulled in a breath, and then she made a sound. The microphones caught it, a short, hard burst of noise that the translation module couldn't parse because it wasn't language. It was just volume and aggression and presence pushed out into the air all at once. The front stalker flinched back, half a step. She stepped forward. Not back. Forward. One full step towards 6 predators that each outmassed her by a significant margin, and she did it without hesitating, without looking over her shoulder at the child, without any visible tremor in her posture at all. The pack held its position. The lead animal's head dropped low. Eurovel had seen that gesture in the fauna file. It was a pre-lunge posture. It lunged. She was already moving. Her hand closed around something on the ground. A rock. The cameras caught it, just a rock from the dirt, and she threw it in one smooth motion before the animal covered half the distance between them. It struck the animal across the front of its face. The stalker hit the ground hard, rolled, scrambled back, making a sound that came through the audio feed as high and startled and pained. She screamed at the rest of them. They ran. All 5 of the remaining animals turned and went back into the grass. The injured one followed. In under 30 seconds the pack had been dispersed. No weapons, no backup, nothing but noise and a thrown rock and something in the way she stood that had convinced 6 predators that the cost was not worth it. She picked the child back up. Rel said nothing. Nobody on the bridge said anything. Doss had come in at some point during the standoff. Eurovel hadn't noticed her arrive, and she was standing at the back of the deck with her arms folded, watching the screen. She knew what she was doing, Rel finally said. She's done that before. Yes, said Doss quietly. Eurovel could not look away from the feed. The woman was walking back toward the colony now, child on her hip, not hurrying. She paused once to look back at the grass where the stalkers had gone. She said something to the child. The child said something back, and she laughed. Captain, Doss said from the back of the room. Her voice was calm and careful and not unkind. The Category 4 classification was based on what their bodies can do. She paused. We have been watching what they actually do with them for 3 days. Eurovel stood very still. I'll consider it, he said. Doss said nothing more. She went to her station. On the screen, the woman carried the child home through the tall pale grass, and the land behind her was empty and quiet. Doss had recommended a greeting drone first. Send it down. Let the colony see it. Let them respond. Establish communication through a safe channel before any crew set foot on the surface. It was good advice. It was experienced advice. Eurovel had thanked her for it, and then, the next morning, told her he was taking a ground team down. He told himself it was a command decision. He told himself the behavioral data from 3 days of observation had been enough to justify direct contact. He told himself that a drone was an impersonal way to introduce the compact to a new species. The real reason, if he was honest with himself, was that after 3 days of watching these people through cameras, he needed to understand them in a way that a screen could not give him. And he was a captain. It was his responsibility to make first contact, not send a machine to do it. He took Rel and one of the science team, a Drenathy named Boris who spoke 6 languages and had done surface contact work before. They landed in a clearing 500 meters from the settlement's western edge, in a flat open space with good visibility in all directions. Nothing that could be read as threatening. Nothing that looked like a tactical position. They stepped out of the shuttle. Boris had the translation module active. Rel was carrying the formal greeting package, a small device that broadcast a standard compact identification sequence on multiple frequencies. Eurovel had his hands visible and his rank indicator on. He stood in the center and waited. He had expected to wait longer. A child found them inside for minutes. He came from the direction of the settlement through the low brush at the clearing's edge, stopped when he saw them, and stared. He was perhaps 12 years old, thin, with dark hair and dirt on both knees. He did not run. He did not make any sound for a full 3 seconds, and then he said something, and the module caught it and translated. Are you the ones from the ship? Eurovel blinked. You saw the ship? 3 nights ago, the boy said. My dad saw the lights first. He woke everybody up. The child took a step closer, examining Eurovel with open curiosity. You're blue. That is correct, Eurovel said carefully. Cool, the boy said. Before Eurovel could respond to that, more humans appeared. They came in 2s and 3s from the brush and from the path that led back to the settlement. Farmers, by their clothing. Several older adults. A group of children who had apparently been following the first one and had been less brave about coming forward. 2 adults carrying tools, long-handled, heavy, that the translation module flagged with a small yellow caution indicator as potentially multi-purpose implements. Eurovel's right hand moved toward his side without his full permission. He caught it and stopped it. A human female stepped out from the group. Old, white-haired. She moved slowly but directly, with the kind of ease that came from not being afraid of anything in particular. She looked at Eurovel for a moment. Just looked, the way DOS looked at things, taking in information, and then she spoke. "We saw your lights 3 nights ago," she said, and the module kept up. "We figured you'd come down eventually." She glanced at the 3 of them, at the shuttle behind them, and then back at Eurovel. "We made food. Would you like to come in?" Eurovel stood with the Category 4 label in his memory and the formal greeting package in Rel's hands and every piece of contact protocol he had studied, and an elderly human woman was inviting him to eat. He looked at Bors. Bors gave a very small shrug that said, "I have done 41 first contacts, and this one is new to me also." "That is very kind," Eurovel said. "We would be glad to." She nodded and turned back toward the settlement. The crowd of humans parted naturally to let her through and then closed in around the visitors, not surrounding them, not pressing close, just walking alongside them the way people walked alongside guests. The boy fell into step next to Eurovel. "What do you eat?" the boy asked. "Various things," Eurovel said. "Mostly grain-based preparations. Some proteins. We have bread," the boy said seriously, as if this resolved a significant concern. The settlement was larger up close than it had looked on the cameras. The structures were solid and practical. Everything had been built to last. Thick walls, reinforced frames, doors heavy enough to keep weather out, and probably more than weather. Gardens ran between the buildings, dense and well-maintained. Animals in the eastern enclosures watched the small procession with mild interest. DOS's voice came through Eurovel's earpiece quietly. She was watching the feed from his suit camera. "You walked into their home," she said. "Yes," Eurovel said under his breath. "The soup smells acceptable from here," DOS said. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself," he said. A few of the humans near him looked over at this. The boy grinned like he had heard something funny, even though he couldn't possibly have understood it. The elder led them into a large common structure at the settlement's center. Long tables, light through wide windows. The smell of something warm and heavy in the air. Humans pulled out seats. Someone put a cup in front of each of them. The elder sat across from Eurovel and looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "So," she said, "where are you from?" The ship was dark and quiet when Eurovel finally got back to his quarters. It was past the 3rd rest period. The rest of the ground team had gone to sleep hours ago. Bors had filed his preliminary xenobiological notes, 12 pages, and he had looked slightly dazed when he handed them over, the way researchers looked when they had more material than expected. Rel had gone to bed immediately and said nothing at all, which meant she was either very tired or very thoughtful. Eurovel sat at his desk and opened the compact archive terminal. He typed, "Species 7714H." The file came up. He had read the top section before. Now he went further. The biology notes were extensive, and they all said essentially the same thing in different ways. These creatures were built for endurance and survival in a way that surpassed nearly every compact catalog species. The pain tolerance section had a footnote that said researchers had struggled to calibrate the measurement tools because human test subjects, when asked to report discomfort levels, frequently underreported by a significant margin. Not because they could not feel pain. Because, the footnote said, they seemed to consider complaining about it an inefficient use of time. Eurovel read that twice. He moved to the contact history section. The first survey team had come 40 years ago. They had scanned, classified, quarantined, and filed. Standard procedure. They had spent 2 days in orbit and left. The report was 4 pages, and the conclusion section said, Category 4 life forms present. Quarantine enacted. Recommend resurvey in 15 years. The diplomatic contact team had arrived 11 years later, not 15, some scheduling reason he didn't bother tracking down. By that point, humans had independently developed early warp capability. This had apparently surprised the diplomatic team enough that they had filed a separate alert before proceeding with contact. He found the transcript of the first formal communication between the compact diplomatic vessel and humanity. It was short. The compact team had sent a greeting package and identification sequence. Humanity had responded within 2 hours with a signal that the Compact's translation team spent 4 days decoding. When they had decoded it, the transcript read, "We received your message. We were hoping you would contact us eventually. We have been watching your signals for some years now, and we're not sure of the right way to introduce ourselves. We have many questions. The most important one is, are there others like us out there? And are they okay?" Eurovel stopped reading. He went back and read it again. Not, "What is your military capacity?" Not, "This is our territory." Not, "What can you offer us?" Not any of the 100 opening moves that species made when they first encountered a stranger with a faster ship. Are there others like us? Are they okay? He sat with that for a while. Then he kept reading. The xenobiology report that followed the first formal contact was the longest document in the file, 47 pages, filed by a researcher named Dr. Uvel Sath, a Sovari who had spent 6 years studying humans before writing it. Eurovel skimmed through the biological sections he already knew and found the social structure analysis near the end. Sath had written, "Human social bonding operates on a scale and at a depth that has no precise parallel in compact research. They form what they call family units, but this concept is not limited to biological relation. Humans routinely adopt non-relatives, including members of entirely different species, into this category based on shared experience and proximity alone. The designation, once applied, appears to create a genuine behavioral obligation in the applying individual. Humans have died protecting beings they had known for hours." Below that, in a section Sath had titled simply Summary, the researcher had written, "I have assessed 214 sapient species in my career. Humanity is the only species I have encountered whose greatest tactical asset and greatest point of vulnerability are the same feature. They form attachments quickly, deeply, and with apparent disregard for risk calculation. This means they will sacrifice themselves for others at a rate that defies standard survival modeling. It also means that harming the people they have bonded with is the most reliable way to produce a human response that approaches the Category 4 threat level their biology suggests. In 40 years of contact, the Compact has never triggered that response. I would recommend continued effort to ensure we never do." Eurovel closed the file. He opened a new document and looked at the blank space where the revised threat assessment was supposed to go. He had told DOS he would update the classification. He had known for 2 days that the Category 4 label was wrong. Not because the biology was wrong, but because biology without behavior was not a full picture of anything. He began typing. He wrote carefully. He described the observation data. He described the ground contact. He described what he had read tonight. He wrote that the initial classification methodology had a structural problem. It measured physical capability and assigned threat level without any requirement to assess behavioral patterns or social structure. Then he stopped and looked at what he had written. Filing this would not just change the entry for species 7714H. It would be a direct criticism of the index methodology itself, written by an officer on his 11th day of his first command posting. He thought about the woman in the grass. He thought about the boy asking if he was the one from the ship. He thought about an old woman making food because she figured visitors would come down eventually. He thought about a species alone in the galaxy for all of recorded history, picking up a faint signal from somewhere out in the dark and spending 4 days decoding it so they could ask, "Are they okay?" He saved the document. He did not file it yet, but he saved it. Outside the viewport, the colony's lights were still on below, small and steady in the dark. The woman from the field was called Nara. Eurovel found this out on the second ground visit, when the elder, her name was Sev, and she ran the colony the way experienced people ran things, which was quietly and without much ceremony. Introduced them at the morning work gathering near the eastern enclosures. Nara was shorter than the other adults in the group. She had brown hair pulled back, and her hands were the hands of someone who used them constantly, calloused and certain. She looked at Eurovel with the same measuring expression DOS used on new information. He had prepared for this conversation. He had the upgraded translation module, the full cultural briefing, the diplomatic gift set. He told her that his crew had observed her encounter with the Ridge Stalkers and found her response tactically sound for a non-combatant. Nara looked at him. "Non-combatant?" she said. Eurovel chose his words carefully. "You were unarmed. Against a pack of large fauna." The response was effective, given the constraints. I had a rock, she said. That is not. He paused, trying to find the correct framing. A rock is not generally classified as a combat implement. I've been chasing those animals off the south field for 3 years, Nara said. I know how they think. They want easy. You show them you're not easy, they find something else. She looked at him. Also, I had a knife. I just didn't need it. Eurovel recalibrated. He put the diplomatic notes away and spent the rest of the day actually talking to people. The elder, Sev, walked him through the settlement's history over a second meal. They had been on this world for 9 years. The first 2 had been difficult. The planet had seasons that were not in any database, and they had lost their first harvest entirely. Sev described this the way a person described a problem they had already solved, with facts and no visible distress. They had adapted. They had learned the local crop cycles and built food storage that could carry the colony through bad seasons. They had mapped the ridge stalker territories and adjusted the field boundaries accordingly. You mapped the predator territories? Eurovel asked. Of course, Sev said. No point in putting your fields where the animals already live. They were here first. He met a carpenter named Wolt who had lost 2 fingers to a machine accident in year 3. Wolt showed him the healed scars with the mild pride of someone showing off a thing they had been through and come out the other side of. He was currently building an extension on the community hall with 3 other workers, and he managed most of the cuts and joins himself, 2 fingers short, without apparent difficulty. He met the boy from the clearing, whose name was Seb. Seb had decided that Eurovel was interesting and followed him for most of the afternoon, asking questions with the directness of someone who had not yet learned to pretend questions were impolite. Does your ship have a bathroom? Seb asked. Yes, Eurovel said. How many? 4. Seb thought about this. That seems like not very many. There are 12 crew members, Eurovel said. Seb considered. Still, he said. In the late afternoon, Eurovel sat with Nara at the edge of the south field. She was checking the boundary markers, the system they used to track whether ridge stalkers had come close during the night. She did it efficiently, moving from post to post with a long stride, reading small indicators that Eurovel could not fully interpret. He asked her how the colony had ended up on this world specifically. He had seen the settlement survey reports in the archive. There were closer, easier worlds available when the colony ship had been routed. Nara was quiet for a moment. She checked the last marker and then stood up straight and looked out across the field at the grass moving in the afternoon wind. We picked it because no one else wanted it, she said. Eurovel waited. The easier worlds already had people interested in them, she said. Compact survey flags, corporate interests, other colonies. This one was off the main routes. Difficult climate, no major resources that anyone was excited about. Our charter said we had the right to settle any unclaimed world we could reach. She shrugged. So we came here. Knowing it would be hard, Eurovel said. Knowing it would be ours, Nara said. She went back to her markers. Eurovel stood in the field and looked at the grass and thought about that. Not wanting the easy thing, not fighting for the valuable thing, but going to the place nobody else wanted because there, at least, it would belong to them. On the walk back to the settlement, he passed a group of children sitting in a circle in the dirt, doing something with small pieces of carved wood. He stopped to look. One of them explained it was a game. The rules were complicated, and the child explained them 3 times before Eurovel understood approximately half of them. He played 1 round. He lost badly. The children were kind about it. Back aboard the ship that evening, Das asked him how the day had gone. I played a game with small humans, Eurovel said. I lost. Did they let you lose, or did they beat you? They beat me. Das made a sound that might have been satisfaction. Good, she said. That's better. Eurovel sat down and opened the assessment document he had saved the night before. He looked at it for a long time. Then he started adding to it. The words came easier this time. He wrote about Nara and her rock and her knife she didn't need. He wrote about Wolt and his 2 missing fingers. He wrote about a colony that picked the hard world because it would be theirs. He wrote about a child who beat a compact officer at a game made of carved wood and was kind about it. He wrote, these people are not dangerous because they want to be. They are dangerous because the universe kept trying to stop them, and they never once agreed that it had the right to. He read that back. He left it in. The report was 41 pages long when Eurovel finally filed it. He had spent 2 full days writing and rewriting it. Bors had reviewed the xenobiological sections and added 3 pages of his own notes. Rel had contributed the sensor data, neatly organized and annotated. DOS had read the whole thing once, made 6 small corrections for accuracy, and said nothing else. The report began with a full account of the initial scan and classification, no softening, no excuses. It stated clearly that Eurovel had received a Category 4 alert and enacted quarantine protocol as required. It then documented, in order, everything that had followed. The observation data, the behavioral logs, the ground contact visits, the archive research. It included the transcript of humanity's first message to the compact, the one that asked, "Are there others like us? Are they okay?" The revised threat assessment for species 7714H was included in full. Eurovel had changed the classification from Category 4 apex predator to Category 1 non-aggressive sapient. He had written a detailed justification that took 4 pages. Then came the section DOS had read most carefully and said least about. Eurovel had written a formal recommendation that the compact's biological threat index be reviewed by an independent panel. He had argued, with specific examples and data citations, that the index is currently structured measured physical capability without any requirement to assess behavioral patterns, social structure, or historical contact data. He had identified 2 other species currently flagged at Category 3 or above that he believed were potentially misclassified by the same methodology. He filed the full report to Compact Command and went to eat. DOS found him 2 hours later. "Command has received the report," she said. "Good. Your supervisor has sent a private message." She handed him the data pad. He read it. His supervisor was a senior Drenithi official named Verith who had been with the Compact Survey Division for 30 years. The message was professionally worded and very clear. It said the report was received and would undergo standard review. It said the revised species classification would be assessed in the normal process, which took 6 to 12 months. It said the recommendation regarding the threat index, while noted, the word Verith had used was premature. It said that filing formal criticisms of methodology on a first command posting was inadvisable and had the potential to affect how senior officers perceived his judgment. The last line said, "I am sure you understand the importance of demonstrating sound decision-making at this stage of your career." Eurovel put the datapad down. He went to the observation deck. DOS followed him. They stood at the wide forward viewport and looked at the planet below. The colony was on the day side right now. He could see the dark green of the southern fields, the pale cluster of the settlement buildings, the thin thread of a road running east. "What will you do?" DOS asked. Eurovel had been thinking about that for the 2 hours since he filed the report. He had known this was a possible outcome. He had known it when he wrote the recommendation. He had written it anyway because it was accurate, and because if it sat in his files and he never sent it, he would know it sat there, and he would know why. "I'll file the recommendation again," he said. "Properly. Formal channels, full documentation, every supporting data point referenced and cited. I'll request an independent review panel through the Science Division rather than the Survey Division." DOS was quiet for a moment. "That will take a long time." "Yes. It may not succeed. It may not," he said. "But it's accurate, and it's the right thing to do. Those 2 things together are usually enough of a reason." DOS looked at the planet. "Verith is not wrong that it may cost you," she said. "Not quickly, not obviously, but these things accumulate." "I know," Eurovel said. He had thought about the species file at 3 in the morning, alone at his desk. He had thought about a first contact team that had scanned, classified, quarantined, and moved on, and left the species sitting alone in the dark for another 11 years, waiting for someone to come back. He thought about what it would mean to do the same thing to the index review. To file it once, be told it was inadvisable, and let it sit. He thought about Nara turning to face a pack of predators with a rock in her hand and nothing behind her but a child. He filed the formal request the next morning. Science Division, Independent Review Panel, full citation package. He sent a copy to 3 separate departments so it could not quietly disappear from a single inbox. Command's acknowledgement came back in 6 hours. Receipt confirmed. Review timeline estimated at 4 to 8 months. No further comment. Eurovel left orbit that afternoon. The Ardent Cross pulled away from the colony world in a long, slow arc that took it above the dark side, and for a moment the settlement was visible from the viewport. Just the lights, small and scattered and stubborn in the dark below. 3 months later, a message arrived. The Science Division had opened an independent review of the Biological Threat Index. An advisory committee had been formed. Eurovel had been appointed to it as a junior advisor. It was not a promotion. It was not a reward. It was a room full of researchers and officials and documentation and the very slow process of changing a thing that needed changing. He accepted the appointment and reported to the committee's first meeting and sat in the back row and said nothing for the first 2 hours and took notes. At the end of the meeting, the committee chair, a Sovari named Dr. Saf, old and careful and precise, looked at the room and asked if any of the new members had something they wanted to add before the session closed. Eurovel raised his hand. He talked for 6 minutes. He cited his report. He cited the archive file. He cited a woman who chased predators off a field with a rock for 3 years and never thought it worth mentioning until someone asked. Dr. Saf listened without interrupting. When Eurovel finished, she said, "That is exactly the kind of thing we need in this room." She moved to the next item. Eurovel wrote it down in his notes. He looked at it for a moment. Then he turned the page and kept going.